Welcome to this explainer. If you're an international investor, a project developer, or maybe a lender operating in the China-Malaysia corridor, managing the China factor really boils down to one absolutely crucial thing: controlling your assets. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into a massive structural puzzle in cross-border asset recovery that has finally been solved for investors.
Now, for a really long time, this massive misconception has completely paralyzed the market. It's the assumption that without a formal bilateral civil and commercial treaty between two countries, you just hit an absolute dead end, right? People just assume that if a dispute blew up and you won a judgment in Malaysia, but the actual assets were sitting in China, well, you were completely out of luck. But today, we're going to completely dismantle that myth.
So here's our game plan. We'll start by looking at that missing treaty misconception. Then explore the rise of legal reciprocity, walk through Malaysia's common law path, navigate the new procedural rules, and wrap up with the commercial impact on bankability.
All right, let's jump straight into part one, the missing treaty misconception.
Okay, here's the reality on the ground. China and Malaysia do actually have a judicial assistance treaty, but, and this is a big but, it's strictly limited to criminal matters. There is zero bilateral treaty covering civil and commercial judgments. For years, this treaty gap created a massive legal black hole for businesses. Because there was no treaty to fall back on, enforcement relied entirely on an incredibly unforgiving standard known as the reciprocity principle.
That brings us perfectly to part two, the rise of legal reciprocity.
We really need to deeply analyze this legal reciprocity standard, because it explains exactly how enforcement works without a treaty. In the past, Chinese courts demanded what was called factual reciprocity. This meant you literally had to prove that a Malaysian court had historically, in the past, recognized a Chinese judgment. It was a total catch-22, a ridiculous who-goes-first deadlock. But thankfully, we've now seen a brilliant shift to legal reciprocity. This bypasses the treaty issue entirely by asking one simple question: does the foreign country's law theoretically allow for the recognition of a Chinese judgment? If that legal door is even slightly open over there, China opens its doors over here.
This whole shift became official in 2021 when China's Supreme People's Court laid out three really flexible standards. You've got consensus reciprocity and diplomatic commitment. But legal reciprocity, that is the primary engine now. It's basically the master key that unlocks foreign judgment recognition without needing a formal treaty at all. Honestly, it's a complete game changer for managing cross-border disputes.
Let's look at how fast this evolved. We started with that rigid, factual standard way back in 1994. Then, fast forward to 2021, the Supreme Court adopts legal reciprocity. Boom. In 2023, the Apostille Convention kicks in, which vastly speeds up the paperwork. And then in 2024, China rolls out a new civil procedure law detailing exactly how this all operates. The big takeaway here? Asset recovery has completely transformed from a theoretical legal brick wall into a highly manageable commercial variable.
Moving right along to part three, Malaysia's common law path.
So Malaysia actually has a dual-track system for foreign judgments. Track 1 is the super-fast statutory path under the Reja Act. The catch? China isn't on the approved list for that track. So investors have to use Track 2, the common law fresh action. This path is open to anyone. And under this logic, you basically treat a foreign judgment not as a standard court order, but as an unpaid invoice, an implied contractual debt. This super creative common law workaround is the exact gateway that makes reciprocity with China possible.
Now, I don't want to paint this as a walk in the park. It's absolutely not a free pass. The judgment has to be for a definite sum of money. It must be final. The original court actually needed legitimate jurisdiction, and the process couldn't violate natural justice, meaning, everyone got a fair hearing. On top of that, recent rulings from the Malaysian federal court mandate some brutal strictness on evidence. You can't just rock up with some photocopies. You have to definitively prove the judgment's authenticity. It is a very high bar.
But here is the absolute core of our deep dive today. This explains exactly why China and Malaysia achieve reciprocity without a treaty. Because this common law path is legally available for Chinese judgments in Malaysia, even with all those high hurdles, Chinese courts look at that and say, yep, legal reciprocity exists. You don't need a bilateral treaty because the domestic laws of both countries are acting as a functional bridge. This mutual legal recognition completely shatters that missing treaty misconception.
Okay, let's head into part four, navigating the new rules.
80%. Just think about that number for a second. That represents the percentage increase in document processing efficiency thanks to a massive procedural shift in late 2023. If you've ever been tangled up in cross-border litigation, you know that just getting documents authenticated can eat up months and totally derail your timeline.
So where did this massive efficiency come from? China joined the Hague Apostille Convention. Now, step 1 is just notarization, and that's only for private documents. Step 2, you grab an apostille directly from the Malaysian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Step 3, a certified Chinese translation. That's it. By scrapping the agonizing multi-month double consular legalization process and replacing it with this slick, single-step apostille process, the timeline to secure your cross-border assets just plummeted. It's a massive operational win.
But hold your horses, because while the documents might move faster now, the judicial scrutiny is way tighter. China's new 2024 civil procedure law sets up some very strict guardrails. They're going to aggressively look at indirect jurisdiction, meaning they'll really question if the Malaysian court genuinely had the right to hear the case to begin with. They're also hunting for a lack of connection to the dispute, breaches of exclusive choice of court agreements, or parallel proceedings happening elsewhere. What this really means is that a poorly drafted jurisdiction clause in your original contract can still get your enforcement thrown out, and that completely overrides any reciprocity you thought you had.
Finally, let's look at Part 5, Commercial Impact on Bankability.
So why does all this actually matter to a project sponsor or a lender? Because the China factor is not just some abstract legal hurdle. It's a fundamental variable for financing, asset control, and risk allocation. If your EPC contractor is Chinese, or if your parent company guarantees backed by assets in China, your project's entire bankability relies on whether you can actually touch those assets if everything goes sideways. Truly understanding legal reciprocity is the difference between writing off a project as unbankable and structuring a completely bulletproof cross-border recovery strategy.
I absolutely love this saying. A legal position is meaningless if the commercial reality prevents you from controlling the cash flow. It hits the nail on the head. Winning a judgment in Malaysia? That's just step 1. It's literally just a piece of paper. Turning that paper into actual recovered capital in China means you have to master this reciprocity framework from day 1 and ensure your contracts totally align with China's 2024 civil procedure law.
So I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to evaluate your own project risk. You might be totally confident you can win the case in court, but is your contract actually structured to recover the assets under these new rules of legal reciprocity? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Make sure your commercial reality actually matches your legal strategy. And we'll see you next time. Oh, and just a quick reminder, this explainer is strictly for general information and discussion. It's not legal, investment, or professional advice. Catch you later.